Hey guys, it's James from Sports Data Market, and today we're going to be using our boxing API to perform a data analysis. The data analysis we're going to be performing today is we're going to be mapping the number of men's WBC champions, unique men's WBC champions, I should say, to their respective home countries. So we're going to try to see how many WBC champions are from, say, the United States or England, and we're going to have them in a way where we can see which countries have the most champions, I should say. We can group them top 5, bottom 5, etc. So without further ado, let's copy this endpoint right here. Let's hop over to VS Code and let's write some code. I'm going to be using Python today. So this is a language agnostic tool. You can use JavaScript or Golang. I'm working out of a virtual environment today as well. So the only library I had to use, or pip install I should say, is the request library. Additionally, I'm going to import the built-in JSON library. So refreshing on what we want, let's map the number of men's WBC champions to their respective home country. So I'm going to get started and create a variable here called men's WBC champions. I'm going to set that equal to request.get with our URL that we copied from our docs. This has our key, we can see. It's pretty nice. We don't have any URL parameters in this endpoint. And then on the subsequent line or the next line, I'm going to extract the JSON. I'll say JSON is equal to .json. Awesome. And then I'm going to use a map. It's going to be the data structure I'm going to use today. I'm going to call it boxer names by country. And what I'm going to be using it for is I'm going to map the countries to a list of the champions. And making sure that we only add unique champions. This should give us a list where we can see which champions belong to which countries, and it should also, using the length function, we can see the number of champions that belong to that respective country. So let's dive into this. I'm actually going to print out the JSON just so we can see what we're working with. Let's hop over to the terminal and let's run this script. Awesome. We see we get back a lot of data. So this is all the men's WBC champions. And we can see it's a mapping. The key men's WBC champions maps to a list of objects. And each object contains things like the title ID, the champ name, the champ ID, which we're going to use to try to get the birth information for each champion, the order of their holding, rank, length, and a lot of other details, right? Division, sanctioning body. We can see it is a WBC. It'll be WBC for all these. But we can see this is the data that we're working with. And so continuing on, I'm going to want to loop over this data. I'm going to say for every object in our men's WBC champions JSON. And remember, we want to index it with that men's WBC champions key. So looping over this. Let's see what we want to do, right? So we want to loop over each object. We want to extract the champ ID. And we're going to come back over here to the documentation. And let's check out this endpoint right here, the single boxer biography endpoint. So this boxer ID, the champ ID, is also compatible with this endpoint. But this is going to get us the biography related metadata for a particular boxer. So coming back over to the terminal, we're going to want to loop over each object, extract the champ ID, make sure it's not none. And then if it's not none, we're going to want to call this endpoint and plug in the champ ID right here. And this should give us back just initially the biography related metadata for a boxer. And so let's write the code to extract the champ ID. Let's extract it from each object. Then making sure the champ ID is not none. If it's not none, that's when we're going to want to call this endpoint. So let's copy this guy, this single boxer biography endpoint. and I'm going to create a variable, call it single, so boxer biography information. And I'm going to set it equal to request.get and plug in the endpoint. Python, I'm going to make use of the replace function, pretty easy. And I'm going to want to replace this boxer ID with the champ ID that we extracted. Since it's a string, I'm going to want to make sure that I cast it as a string. And then on the next line, let's pull out the JSON. Awesome. And then I'm just going to want to, similarly to what we just did, I'm just going to want to print out the JSON so we know what we're working with. Give it some space. Comment this line out, and let's run this code. See what we got here. And so we see we're getting a list of all of these different boxers. These are the men's WBC champions. And we can see it's a lot of data. I just wanted to print out a handful of these guys. And we're going to want to focus in on this birth information key. We can see that the JSON that we get for each call to this is the key of single boxer biography mapped to an object that contains things like their boxer ID, their name, their birth information, height, weight, reach, stance, a lot of metadata, wins, losses, etc. But we're going to try to pull out this birth information key along with the boxer name key because this is going to give us our mapping of the name to the respective country. So let's look a little bit closer at this birth info key. We can see that there's a lot of birth information in this key. But when we look at the pattern, right, I'm trying to find someone who's from England and the United States. Here we go. So when we look at the pattern, we see that if we separate by the last comma, the trailing data is or string, I should say, is the country, right? United States here, separate by comma here, England, United States, Soviet Union, this very last guy right here. See, separated by the last comma, it'll be Soviet Union. So we want to loop over each of these pieces of data, pull out the name, pull out the birth information, write some code to extract the country from this birth information key, which we're going to separate by the last comma. And making use of this data structure here, that should give us the mapping that we're looking for. And we're going to make sure that it's unique as well. So let's get back into it. I'm going to create a variable. I'm going to call it boxer birth information. And I'm going to want to set it equal to our JSON. Remember, the key we're indexing is going to be the single boxer biography key. And we're going to want to pull out this birth information key. Awesome. And then the next line, I'm going to want to pull out the name. It's going to be similar from the same object. But instead of the birth information, I'm going to type in boxer name for this key. Awesome. And then to pull out the country, we're going to need to make use of a helper function. Remember, the pattern we're going off of here is we see that if we separate by the last comma, this will give us the country that the respective boxer was born in. And so the helper function, let's call it, I don't actually write it up here at the top. I'm going to call it get text after last comma. Take in a text. And we're going to want to separate by that last comma we see. So I'm going to say our last comma index is equal to our text dot r find. Our rightmost find of the comma, and if our last comma index is equal to -1, we're going to want to return the text, else let's return text index. Awesome. So this should shave off the text separated to the right of that last comma. And so I'm gonna title the next variable down here boxer country. And I'm gonna make use of our help function. Type in the boxer birth information is what we want here. Okay, strip, make sure all white space is stripped on either side. Cool. And then we can print this out just to make sure we know what we're working with here. I'm actually going to comment these guys out just so we can see. This should give us a list. Yeah, United States. So the first 4 or 5 were United States, but we see it's going to give us a list of the respective country. And then making use of the boxer name, we can do our mapping. So the last clause we want to write down here is making use of our mapping. So we want to say if our boxer country is in our map, which we call boxer names by country, if boxer name, and then right here I'm gonna write a clause because we don't want to double add a boxer. The list we get back might have some guy like Manny Pacquiao multiple times over because he might have been a multiple time WBC champ, but he's right from the Philippines, so we want to only add him one time when we're doing this mapping. So the clause I'm going to have here, I'm going to say if our boxer name is not in our map boxer named by country, index with our boxer country, then we just want to append to that respective country. And the second part is if, we're going to say else. So if our boxer country isn't in our map, that means it's the first champion we've seen from that country. So we want to index into our map by the boxing country, boxer's country. And since it will be our first time adding the boxer, we want to set it equal to an empty list. So subsequent times we'll just be appending to that list. Awesome. So this is pretty much the logic, lines 32 through 17. And then I'm going to write some logic down here. Or even before we do that, let's just print out our map. We can just print boxer names by country just to see what we have after you're performing all this logic. Let's comment out all print statements. And let's run this code. Awesome. So we see we got some data back here, and we can see we have our mapping right here. We have the United States mapping to a list. See Sonny Liston, Muhammad Ali, Joe Frazier, George Foreman. See down here, Polish People's Republic, Sweden, Badu Jack, Armenia, South Africa even has a few champions. Canada, Mexico has a bunch. Canelo, Barrera, Soto. I think I see a second USA key. So we could just write some logic and theory to add that to this key. But what I'm going to want to do rather than that is to finish this video off, I'm just going to write some logic here. Remember, what we wanted to do is kind of see the mapping to the number. So here we can see the mapping of the number of champions to their country. See these WBC champions who are from Cuba, from the United States. Really cool stuff. England, Lennox Lewis, Frank Bruno, Tyson Fury, David Hay. Right, but these are a lot of just names, right? If we want to narrow down the number, the particular number, let's write some logic to do that. And so coming back over here, let's loop over this, right? We're going to want to loop over the country and the list of names. So I'm going to say for the country and I'll call it name list, and boxer names by country.items. I'm going to want to set a count here equal to 0, and then loop over the name list. So for name and name list, I'm going to want to increment this count. This will give us the number of champions respective to that country. And I'm actually just going to write some logic right here to say if the count is greater than 10, we're going to want to print the country, the count, so the amount of champions from that respective country, and we're going to want to print out what that the respective the list. So here we have the country, the count, the number, and this should be the list. And I'll give it some more space and comment this guy out. Let's clear this and let's rerun the script. Awesome. So we got some data back here. We can see that we grouped by our country the number of respective WBC champions from that country, and we see we have the list of those WBC champions beside it. So we wrote our condition to group only if the number of WBC champions exceeded 10, and we see that our result, we have 93 from the United States, Sonny Liston, Muhammad Ali, we see Joe Frazier, lots of guys in here. England, we see we have Lennox Lewis, Tyson Fury, Tony Bellew, David Hay. Mexico has 67 champions. We see Canelo's in here, Leo Santa Cruz, Julio Cesar Chavez. Philippines has 13 champions. Pacquiao, Nonito Donaire is right there. Japan, very impressive, has 31 WBC champions, and Thailand has 20 WBC champions. So we can see how many champions are from each country, order them respectively, do a lot of really cool analysis with just say 40 lines of Python code using our API. So feel free to come over to Sports Data Market, make an account. You can tinker with our API for free. You can use this to power an AI, build a website or a mobile app. Lots of really cool things. So thank you for tuning in, guys. Till next time, James from Sports Data Market.